Have you ever heard someone say of another person, particularly a child, he had the face of an angel? It's an interesting description, but we all understand that it means something along the lines of beauty or innocence. There are stories in the Bible of people who literally seem to have the face of an angel. What made these people shiny? And is it possible that seeing Yahweh could kill someone? Welcome to the Ghost in You podcast, a podcast about the weird, the wonderful, and the terrifying in the Bible. I'm Diane Student, your guide and host on this strange journey through the Bible. Episode 22, Shiny People. As Christians, we're all called to be a light in the world. Daniel 12, verse 3 reads, "And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever." But we don't actually glow. Myths and legends from around the world share stories of shining beings. Ireland was once said to be ruled by the Tuatha De Danann, who were said to be an ancient pre Celtic Irish tribe. And please forgive me, I don't speak Gaelic or Celtic or Irish or any of those, so I'm going to butcher some of this probably. They were said to be an ancient pre Celtic Irish tribe. They weren't described as being human per se, rather, they looked human like, almost like elves, and they were said to be elegant, red haired, blue eyed, and shining with light. What I find interesting is that they brought secret knowledge with them from their gods, kind of like the Watchers. And even more fascinating is that they arrived on ships that came down from the heavens in a mist. They stayed because they burned their ships. So they kind of made it so they'd be stuck here. Ireland is an interesting country in that it doesn't really have a creation story. It just always seemed to exist and was invaded by various people. So when you look back through all of their legends and their myths, that's what seems to be going on. It's not like here's where Ireland got birthed and then, there were these tribes who just came from nowhere. It's just like it kept getting invaded by other people. The Tuatha De Danann were the fifth such group to invade Ireland. The name of these people meant people of the goddess Danu. This was a Celtic goddess of fertility and wisdom, and in Hindu, there is also a goddess who had the name Danu, and she was of the primordial or primeval waters. Now, for those of you who have listened to the other Ghost in You podcasts, especially winding all the way back to Leviathan, you know that we talked about this Hebrew word that was yam, and this was the sea. It was a word for the sea. And it was always associated with chaos. And this chaos existed before Yahweh created the world that we live in today. So to me, I would say that was primordial. So this Danu almost seems to go back to the time of Yam. Genesis 1, verse 2 reads, "The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." And as we've discussed in previous episodes, the deep was referring to a watery deep that was a chaotic, abyss like deep. The second use of water in that verse that I just read for you is thought to pertain more to a life giving water. So we go from a chaotic, I wouldn't even say water, it's some kind of chaos that is associated with water, to life giving water. And it's all within that same verse there. The Tuatha De Danann have been associated with the Sumerian Anunnaki. The Irish told stories of the Shining Ones battling with the Fomorian, which were the undersea people of Irish myth, and they defeated them. And the Shining Ones is another word that was used for the Tuatha De Danann. The Fomorian were said to be descendants of Cain or Ham in the Bible. Legends claim that the Tuatha De Danann also battled the Milesians and were driven underground by them. The Milesians were said to be the ancestors of the Celts, so that's where the Celts come down from. So the Celts basically defeated the Shining Ones in their ancestral form, I guess you could say. The Shining Ones were then relegated to a less powerful entity like fairies. So when you talked about elves or fairies, that's who these Tuatha De Danann were said to be. But that's not where they started, obviously. The Liabhar Gabhala translates to Book of Invasions and is a fictitious history of Ireland, but the Britannica website claims the Shining Ones were treated as actual people and, quote, they were so regarded by native historians up to the 17th century. So they weren't treated as myth for a big chunk of history. And you know how I feel about that. If they were treated as real people for most of history, they probably were. Where I fall along the lines when it comes to the Greek gods of myth, the Roman gods of myth, the Egyptian gods. I think all of them were once someone real or something or an entity that was real and probably still exists, and we just call it by a different name. The aforementioned Anunnaki were sometimes depicted as luminous beings. In all varieties of myths and traditions, these shining ones are said to have a divine wisdom, and they sure sounded like fallen angels to me. But why did these beings or people shine? Now, if you're watching Ancient Aliens, they've got all kinds of ideas about this. And of course, they talk about the Anunnaki a lot and have mentioned the shining ones as well. Myths of these luminous entities claim that they are on a higher spiritual vibration or that a divine light emanates from them. So it's almost like an inner divine light. Thinking that these entities might be fallen angels, we also have to ask, what makes angels shine? For biblical angels, the light is believed to be a reflection of Yahweh. 1 John chapter 1, verse 5 reads, God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. And an example of this reflecting through the angels happened when the angels appeared to the shepherds in the field to announce the birth of Jesus. This is from Luke chapter 2, verse 9. It tells us, and an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were filled with great fear. So this angel shows up, and the glory of the Lord shone all around them. It doesn't say that Yahweh shows up. So very interesting. How are the angels giving off the glory of the Lord? It must be something that they reflect. The angel that appeared to Daniel had a face, quote, like lightning. And the angel in Yeshua's empty tomb also had an appearance like, quote, lightning. And we all know how bright lightning can get. It is clear that these are powerful angels, and they are the ones sent directly from Yahweh to bring important messages, which leads one to believe that they generally stand in the presence of Yahweh. They are radiating His glory, and this radiance isn't something that just goes away once someone steps out of the presence of Yahweh. And one of the reasons why we know that is not because of the angels, it's because of Moses. When the Israelites were wandering around the wilderness for 40 years, Moses went up onto Mount Sinai and he spent 40 days and 40 nights with God, receiving the law. I believe that Moses got the full download of the Torah at this time since he's credited with writing the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. He obviously didn't witness all that history, so it had to be revealed to him. And here is something amazing. While angels probably can be in the complete presence of Yahweh, we cannot, or else we will die, according to the Bible. And so Moses couldn't just be in the full presence of the Lord either. So when he was up on Mount Sinai with the Lord, it wasn't like they were just sitting there together face to face, because Moses could not see the face of God and live. So he didn't see God in his full glory, only a theophany. Yahweh placed him in a cleft on the mount, and then he passed before Moses. This is from Exodus 33, verses 12 to 23. Moses said to the Lord, "See, you say to me, bring up this people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my sight. Now therefore, if I have found favor in your sight, please show me now your ways, that I may know you in order to find favor in your sight. Consider too that this nation is your people. And he said, My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. And he said to him, If your presence will not go with me, do not bring us up from here. For how shall it be known that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people? Is it not in your going with us so that we are distinct, I and your people, from every other people on the face of the earth? And the Lord said to Moses, This very thing that you've spoken I will do, for you found favor in my sight, and I know you by name. Moses said, Please show me your glory. And he said, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and will proclaim before you my name, the Lord. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. But he said, You cannot see my face, for man shall not see me and live. And the Lord said, Behold, there's a place by me where you shall stand on the rock. And while my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I've passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen. And I should point out here that Moses had already come down from Mount Sinai a time before this. And when he saw that the Israelites had turned away from the Lord and they built this golden calf and were worshiping and sacrificing before it, he had the 2 tablets that had the commandments on it, the 10 commandments, and he threw them on the ground and broke them. So he had to go back up on Mount Sinai and hope that God would give him some more tablets. So that's what's happening here is he's getting a second set. This is the second time the law has been given to him. It's a second 40 days and 40 nights as well. Exodus chapter 34, verses 29 to 33 reads, When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand, as he came down from the mountain, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. Aaron and all the people of Israel saw Moses, and behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the leaders of the congregation returned to him, and Moses talked with them. Afterward, all the people of Israel came near, and he commanded them all that the Lord had spoken with him on Mount Sinai. And when Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil over his face. So, what we can reason from this event is that only a portion of Yahweh made Moses appear radiant when he came down from Mount Sinai and presented the law to the Israelites. He wanted to see the full glory of God, but he couldn't. This is just a portion of the glory of God. And he comes down and he is shining, and he doesn't even realize he's shining, which is just stunning to me. It's like there must have been something about his eyes because he didn't realize he was shining like that. I don't know. Or God made it so he wouldn't be aware. Or I kind of feel like, when you look at the sun for too long and then you're kind of sun blind, light blind, that kind of thing, or into a light for too long. It's just like I have a light here that it's like a ring light. And sometimes when I look up at it and then I look down, I see the ring right here. Kind of the same effect. So I don't know if it was just that his eyes were kind of like it had been around so much brightness with God that he didn't realize that he was actually shining too. Imagine a full-on presence of God. No wonder it would cause a human to fall over dead. These people were afraid of just a portion. That was the purpose of the curtain in the temple, to protect sinners from a holy God. You just cannot be in the presence, the glory of God like that as a human being. And it's always interesting to read Yahweh given anthropomorphic attributes like a back and a hand, and how immense that hand would be if it could cover this cleft that a full-grown man like Moses was placed within. Just how immense is God? Moses shone so bright that he scared the Israelites and had to put a veil over his face. This was really unusual for a number of reasons, the main one, of course, being that his face was so bright. But also, Moses would have fasted in 2 40-day increments in fast succession here. So we're talking 80 days. That's a lot of starvation. So he should have appeared to be gaunt and drawn, not bright and shiny. And that also would have been 40 days and 40 days. So 80 days without water. Because every time you hear about these 40 days and 40 nights of fasting, it's also without water. but Yahweh gave him what he needed. The shining of Moses' face would dim, but every time he entered the presence of God again, the brightness would be revived. Moses would address the Israelites on behalf of Yahweh and take the veil off, and then place the veil back over his face after he was finished speaking. It was like giving the people a glimpse of God. So he would go into wherever they were setting up the tabernacle, and he would take the veil off when he was in the presence of God, and then he would come out, reflect it, then put the veil back on. Paul wrote of this time in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 13 to 18, not like Moses, who would put a veil over his face so that the Israelites might not gaze at the outcome of what was being brought to an end. But their minds were hardened. For to this day, when they read the Old Covenant, that same veil remains unlifted, because only through Christ is it taken away. Yes, to this day, whenever Moses is read, a veil lies over their hearts. But when one turns to the Lord, the veil is removed. Now, the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. And this is Paul contrasting a temporary fading glory, like what Moses had on his face, and the permanent glory that came after Christ's sacrifice and the new covenant started. So basically, we can all be shiny people. Though, to be sure, it isn't the outward manifestation like Moses. We don't actually shine and have shiny faces. Yeshua had his own moment of being shiny when he climbed to the top of what we call the Mount of Transfiguration. Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 to 2 shares the narrative. And after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John his brother and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. Elijah shows up, and interestingly, Moses. So it's one shiny person coming down to another shiny person. Elijah and Moses, of course, disappear shortly thereafter, and Yeshua returns to normal. This certainly makes it seem as though a portal opened up or that Yahweh was on top of the mountain. Because remember, when Jesus was down here, he was not in his full glory as being God. And I believe, as I said in the Mount Hermon episode, that the Mount of Transfiguration was Mount Hermon, and that Yeshua and the disciples crossed a threshold where the glory of Yahweh could be seen reflected in Yeshua and Moses and Elijah. And then I think Yahweh left and took Elijah and Moses with him, and that's why the light seemed to go away. The glory of the Lord had left. And I believe that Mount Hermon has some kind of portal, something on top of it. And that's why you would have a lot of these fallen angels that would come down this way. This is where God would come down. So that's why I think the Mount of Transfiguration was Mount Hermon. Of course, the Bible doesn't say that, so that's my own opinion. I'm sure there are people who disagree with me. Now, the final shiny person in the Bible was the martyr Stephen. He would be the first Christian martyr. Stephen was a man full of faith and the Spirit of God, and he was one of the first of 7 men chosen to care for the poor in place of the apostles so that they would be free to just go and preach. They were trying to take care of a lot of the less fortunate in the city, and it was taking up a lot of their time. And they were like, we are supposed to go out and be preaching. So we need somebody else to take care of, I don't know what else you would call it, the church's busy work maybe, or what the church is actually supposed to do is take care of the people. And so Stephen was one of these 7 men that they trusted, that they called up to help them with that. But Stephen also preached the gospel, and he was powerful in this capacity. And he drew a lot of ire from the Jewish leaders because Stephen was saying that the gospel was for everybody and that non-Jews could be saved. These Jews riled up the powers that be and accused Stephen before the ruling council of speaking evil against the law of Moses and the temple. When Stephen was questioned by the council, he stood up and answered, and when he did, his face was shining. The Bible says that they saw that his face was like that of an angel. Acts chapter 7, verses 54 to 60 reads, "Now when they heard these things, they were enraged, and they ground their teeth at him." Can you imagine what that was to be like? Arrgh. But he, full of the Holy Spirit, gazed into heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. And he said, "Behold, I see the heavens opened and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." But they cried out with a loud voice and stopped their ears and rushed together at him. Can you imagine? He is reflecting the glory of God because the heavens have opened, it's shining down on him, he's having this vision, and they still rush at him even though he had to have been glowing like Moses, which caused the Israelites to be fearful. These Jews are so angry, they're not even afraid that this glory of the Lord is shining off of Stephen. And they stop their ears. I just love it. We don't want to hear you. Then they cast him out of the city and stoned him. I don't think there's much worse way to die other than being burned on a pyre. And the witnesses laid down their garments at the feet of a young man named Saul. And as they were stoning Stephen, he called out, "Lord Jesus, receive my spirit." And falling to his knees, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." And when he had said this, he fell asleep. Wow. Stephen looked up and could see into heaven and saw Yeshua. It's got to be a great vision before you pass away, for sure. So clearly he is reflecting in his face what he is seeing. And just as Yeshua said on the cross, "Father, forgive them for what they do," so Stephen also asked for forgiveness for those stoning him. And interestingly, who was there watching the coats of the stoners and witnessing this execution? Saul, before he would be forever changed and named Paul by Yeshua. Some biblical studies say that the description of Stephen's face was just an expression, but I have no doubt that Stephen's face glowed in a supernatural way. We're called to be vessels of divine light in a dark world. And one day, some of us will stand in the full glory of Yahweh and reflect that radiance forever. I imagine the new earth and the new heaven after the end of time will be a very, very shiny place. Will you be one of the shiny people? The ghost in you knows. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode. May God bless you and keep you. This has been a production of History Goes Bump.